Hello.
Good evening, Graham, and good evening, Anthony. It seems if I go back out again, then I can be heard.
Last 11 days I've been in Amsterdam, Paris, London, Leeds, and obviously Harrogate. What a terrible life I lead. Awful.
A jet-setting Graham Chalmers. I was in
Well,
Amsterdam.
trains, a lot of trains involved rather than jets.
Yeah,
So
I was
obviously
in
jets is
Amsterdam
much
last night,
better.
but that was at the cinema, seeing the
Oh,
new David O. Russell film, which I might
any good?
return to. So it's had reviews that have been a bit iffy about it, but
Mm,
Celestine and I really enjoyed it. It was a challenging film, but you had star names in it, and what
mm,
I loved about it was all close up on the faces. So you
yeah.
had you had Christian Bale's face. He suffered in the First World War wounds, so he had a face damaged by that and back injuries, etc. You had the beautiful Margot Robbie in the film.
Mm.
You had suddenly Taylor Swift being pushed underneath a
Yeah.
vehicle. That was a
Was she
pretty
any good?
swift.
Was
That was a
Taylor
swift
Swift out?
exit.
Yeah, yeah, very, very swift. But was she tailor made for acting?
She was fine. I mean, she was up against extremely good quality. The actress whose name I never quite get right, the actress who starred in the long series about chess, Anna something. Can't get her name right. The very
Mm.
striking actress. She was in it too. But Anna's definitely her first name, but I can never remember her name fully. Um, and I think the performance that everyone's going to be talking about is John David Washington, Denzel's son, who is by each film. The fact that the first film we saw him in, I think, starring, I'm never going to get the name right. The time traveling one, which was the first big movie back after COVID.
Tenet.
Tenet, right?
Tenet.
So
Yeah,
that kind
by
of
Christopher
announced him,
Nolan.
and in
Oh, no,
this,
no, 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 that's him. Oh, yeah, he was good in that.
yeah, and is very good in this. So it's set in the 1930s. It's a story. It says most of what you watch really happened, and it's no brackets about it. So the significant story was a fascist attempt to overthrow
Mm.
Roosevelt. That was at the heart of the film. It kind of
Oh, yeah.
leads up to that story.
Mm, mm,
I
mm.
thought it was intriguing from start to finish, very
Sounds like an
stylishly.
alternative history of the world to the degree.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was, and it was done with absolute panache. I think there
Mm.
was a feeling that Christian Bale played the comedy side of it a bit broad, and so did Margot Robbie by comparison with John David Washington's performance. I thought that was fair enough to do that. I think it needed the different tones within the film, and
Mm.
I all the way along it was intriguing to see what where this would lead.
Mm.
It also had a
Mm.
beautiful sense of the era of the golden age of jazz. Also, very prominent, noticeably, was just how prominent the women's roles were in the film, and also the number of black acting roles within the film, including black men serving in the First World War. It's something that's never normally shown at
Mm.
all,
Mm.
and that was very
Mm.
strongly in the film as well. So it chimed with where we are now, but with a real clout from the period that it's set in.
Mm. Sounds good.
Not
I'm
many
gonna try and
people
see
there,
that.
not many people there, but that was at View. That was at View, and I think it's good that View was showing it at all.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll come later on to the big topic involving film, but just if we may, you've all interviewed someone that I think I'm due to interview soon. Someone who I'd
Uh,
never interviewed and wasn't a great fan of their music whatsoever, which is Howard Jones, who's coming to Harrogate Theatre very soon, and I've been offered an interview with him. You, however, suffered a communication breakdown. What happened?
basically, he's coming to Harrogate Theatre on Friday, October 28th. Howard Jones is part
Yes.
of a. It's called an acoustic trio tour, but he's playing piano. So I know it's still acoustic, but it's not just him and acoustic guitars. We're playing piano.
No.
And I, like you, wasn't a massive fan at the time, but when you think about it, there's a track, What Is Love, that was a big hit. And
Yes.
I can still remember the chorus, and I haven't heard it for 40 years. So it suggests he was actually quite good. And on top of that, he kept having hits in America till the early 90s, and the Americans don't usually buy rubbish when it comes to
No.
music.
No.
And I remember his lyrics were also quite interesting, all about, breaking chains and questioning things and asking questions about what the world means and what love means. So he was quite an interesting chap. So I thought he's worth a chat to. But sadly, he's because he's interesting. He's also easily riled. So I suggested to him that, having looked at his lyrics now, all these years later,
Mm.
I said, look, you've got a lot in common really with the lyrics of John Anderson of Yes in the 1970s, quite sort of hippie ideals. And well, he didn't
Yeah.
like the word hippie. He said, I'm not a hippie. And I said, well, yeah, there's a lot of philosophy in Eastern religion. It's your words are a bit New Age. He went, no, no, I'm not New Age.
Mm.
And I thought, well, you are a little
Ah,
bit.
this was another Graham Chalmers meets Graham Gouldman moment.
Yeah.
What's interesting,
And so,
Graham, is that
yeah.
why I mean I think as a performer gets older, and with all due respect to Howard Jones, I think he needs publicity to sell tour tickets at this stage in his career. I don't think that's unfair to say that. And
Well, it's a bit because
I
if you
don't
look at his
understand
CV,
getting a bit uppity with
he's in
you. Why
demand.
would he not? I mean, don't you
No,
think
I,
he
I
should have
just,
eschewed the points that you made?
he's a serious guy. He's a serious guy. He thinks deeply about things. So when he doesn't agree with you, it's not out of sort of like emotional annoyance. It's because he's analysed everything, and what you're saying doesn't totally fit his analysis of the situation and the meaning of life, the world, and the universe. So it was fair enough, and he was nice overall. But ironically, his new album's called Dialogue. It's all about how society's become
Not with
polarized.
Graham
Yeah,
Chalmers.
yeah, yeah. It's all society's become polarized, and we need to communicate more with each other. And my phone kept on breaking up because the reception was appalling. And so basically, we had to cut the interview short eventually because we just couldn't communicate.
Can I just check, Graham? Was this interview in Amsterdam, Paris, Leeds, or Harrogate?
This was back at the Harrogate Advertiser offices for the Harrogate
So
Advertiser,
so
and
it
we
wasn't that
ended
you
up
had
getting
communication
on pretty
problems
well
from
because
overseas.
he's a nice guy.
Well,
Yeah,
I'll know,
he's a
Graham, to
nice
not
guy basically,
mention
and if you
New
look at his
Age
CV,
to him.
he's still in demand. He's still very much in demand, Charles. If you look at his recent activities over the last 5, 10 years, he's always busy. He's always touring. He still plays big gigs. He's still
So he probably
successful. He
won't want to
just
speak
doesn't
to me
have
now
hits
if he
anymore.
gets to listen to this after I've suggested that he actually needs publicity.
Yeah, he does. He doesn't. He doesn't. But
Well,
maybe he needs it in
I'm
Harrogate.
glad
I
you've
don't.
clarified that ahead of me putting my foot in it in a different way to you, and probably
Well,
to the extent you might put the phone down
well
on me.
as Howard Jones sang so well and got a number 4 hit in America, no one is to blame.
Graham, but what's love got to do with it?
Uh,
Do
Pick
you
a new
remember
song,
that
please,
chap that you
Charles.
used to have on stage with him in the who was in the Chains? Do you remember?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mentioned him obviously. He said what happened was that before he actually had hits, before he got signed to release songs, he came from a quite arty background and he used to tour pubs with that guy and others. And his show was a sort of multimedia art performance. It wasn't just him singing his songs. He was
Mm.
he's from an arty background, so I think that explains his the conversation I had with him because it's almost like he was an accidental pop star, even though he wanted to be a pop star. He was much more arty than you'd think he would be.
So it's interesting, isn't it? Because that was not how it ever came across. The videos were very
Yeah,
much pop star of the time, the haircut of the time, the dark long coat of the time. And he was also
he
sort
was
of
like
endlessly being compared with. He was being endlessly compared with singer-songwriter Nick Kershaw at the time, which I
well,
imagine probably didn't fill him
having
with joy
chatted to
either.
Howard Jones, having
Mm,
chatted to Howard in person now, there's no way he's anything like Nick Kershaw.
no.
He's really more sort of like if he hadn't had that haircut, been on top of the pops and had huge hits, he would have been pre-Pabst Brown.
So maybe it's one of those stories where record companies pushed him a certain way, and the
No,
hits
he
came.
wanted it. He wanted to be successful, but
He did, yeah.
he wanted to be successful with interesting lyrics, and so people just didn't get that because he didn't look like a serious artist.
No,
He didn't get taken seriously.
no. And that's partly down to the editing of videos, of course, as well, isn't it? Which is all about attracting the pop hit at that time. I mean, that's. But the success in America, what would you put that down to?
He wrote good pop songs, and in
Mm,
America and in Britain, his career went off the ball in the late '80s in terms of hits, singles, and albums. But
yeah,
in America, it
yeah,
carried on
absolutely.
because America's not so fashion-led in music. So once things
No,
get out of fashion in Britain, you can't sell anything. But in
no, you
America,
can't.
if
Of when Howard Jones is playing at Harrogate Theatre,
Friday, October the 28th, not
so it's
long
not
now.
part of the comedy festival then, Graham.
No, there was precious few laughs.
So what is left in the last week of Harrogate Comedy Festival? Maisie Adam did her homecoming gig last night, of course.
Well, I missed that because I was in London for a
Mhm.
Beatles event.
Sold out,
But
Graham.
yeah, there
Sold
was.
out.
Yeah, well, she's great, and So I was really sorry to have missed her. Really sorry. But there's
Did you
quite a
did
lot of
you
things
interview her
still
this
to
time?
come
Because you
in the
have
film.
interviewed her in the past.
Yeah. No, she was great. Really, really smart and really nice. She's
Mm.
just fantastic. But yeah, there's still a lot to come in the comedy festival. Quite a lot of big shows. You got Mitch
Yeah,
Benn, Jenny
yeah.
Eclair, John Richardson. Well, I think John Richardson's actually sold out. You've
That's
got
bound to
Fee
sell out, isn't it?
Glover,
Yeah.
yeah, Fee Glover and Jane Garvey together. You got Sophie Hagen.
Because they've got
So
their
there's
new show starting on Times Radio, haven't they?
yeah, don't mention that. The turncoats leaving the BBC.
Yeah, but they're the latest example saying that they felt it was the time to move. What can you say? It's
I
happening more and more,
don't
Graham.
blame them, but I don't understand them joining Times Radio, quite frank. Harrogate Theatre
Mm.
later this month, and it is by Harrogate Dramatic Society, so it's not a professional touring company. But guess what they're
No.
doing? Because you will love it. I know what you like. You will love this. They're doing improbable fiction by Alan Ayckbourn, and I know how much you like Alan Ayckbourn.
Excellent news. More
Yeah,
Acheborn, the better. Fine, Graham. You've got a chance
yeah.
to watch Graham. You've got a chance to watch Alan Ayckbourn's new play, Family Album. If you
Oh
missed
no.
it at Stephen Joseph
Yeah,
Theatre, which you have, you can now,
yeah,
however,
yeah.
you can download it to watch it, and I'm all in favour of that.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I think you do
Well,
it.
yeah.
I think you should.
There's one Ayckbourn born every minute.
Well, one
It
Acheborn
seems.
Appreciation Society in Charles Hutchinson's house, born every minute. That is probably true. Now, Graham, we've struck a quite light tone so far, but I think one of the saddest bits of news that's come through from I mean, this is absolutely devastating from Scotland. So you and I have been
Mm.
you've been attending the Edinburgh International Film Festival for even longer than me, much longer than me.
Yep.
Likewise, going to the Edinburgh Film House, and the third element is the Centre for the Moving Image. So, for those who haven't heard, and I mean, it's been the most talked about cultural story of the moment, with immediate effect, they ceased trading, and I think 102 people, including my good friend Maxine Gordon's sister, being put out of work just there and then. Absolutely, that's it. And
Mm.
presumably as well, Christy Matheson, the new artistic director of the Edinburgh International Film Festival, who came across from Australia with a great song and dance to take over the event. So, what's your first thoughts on this, Graham?
Well, it's truly appalling. I mean, I think I've been to at least one film at the International Film Festival every single year since 1980 or 81. And on top of
That
that,
is
I first went
extraordinary,
to
isn't it?
the Filmhouse opened on Lothian Road in 1978, and I was there in 1980 for sure. And
Mm,
it's one of my favourite places in the world. I love Edinburgh Filmhouse, and I love the film
mm,
festival. But
mm.
I think, and it's the sort of film festival where once upon a time, for the fact it's in Scotland and Scotland's not a big country, it punched so much above its weight. I mean, the sort of people it's had in person there over the years
It's
include like
extraordinary.
Clint Eastwood, Gene Kelly, David Cronenberg, Martin Scorsese, Tarkovsky, Lars von Trier, Danny Boyle, Sean Connery. Everybody's been there who
Yep.
means anything in movies. But I have to admit that I felt something was up this year that was seemed to be very quiet. It was very low key.
I,
There was fewer films
it
than
was
normal. Then
a
I
tiny
did
press office, which was a clue in
fear,
itself as well.
yeah,
Mm.
I felt something was up, but I didn't realize it was going to be this bad.
As
But it
much,
turns
yeah,
out
as
that
up as this
both the
is.
Filmhouse
Yeah.
and the Edinburgh Film Festival have been run by a charity called the Centre for the Moving Image since 2010.
Yeah.
But if you think about the last 10 years of the film festival that we've been going to, it has sort of like, compared to the glory days of the 90s or the 80s or 70s or whatever, it has
Yeah.
been slightly going off the boil ever since it got moved to June. And I
Absolutely.
think they moved to June when it was out of the film season cycle. It wasn't at the same time as the Edinburgh Festival to attract
No.
both the press and audiences. I think that has turned out to be quite a long-term bad influence on its success. And then you combine
Yes.
that with COVID, 2 years of obviously making no money whatsoever, and also the
Mm.
price of energy for buildings and organizations, with no hope next year of any more money in the pipeline, because it's been a long time since the film festival got major sponsorship from the private sector. It
Yes.
tends to survive on public money and Scottish government money, and when Scotland's not a wealthy country, so I can see what's happened, but it's still absolutely appalling. I mean, if a city as great as Edinburgh can't have a film festival and a brilliant cinema like the Filmhouse, there's something seriously wrong.
I mean, on one level, obviously, Everyman has opened, so another cinema has opened in Edinburgh. I'm not saying that's direct competition for Filmhouse, but on one level, maybe it is. I read, you may have seen the piece too. The wonderful Mark Cousins has written
Oh yeah.
uh, an outstanding piece in the Guardian that's captured the whole flavour of the significance of this happening. Also, just
Mm.
the sense of why this was a film festival like no other. Partly its Scottish characteristics, partly the strong representation from the very, very start of female filmmakers, which was unusual in filmmaking. He made another interesting point, which was that the staff were well paid,
Mm.
which I guess is probably something that's quite rare in the arts. But I imagine that also maybe that's a factor as well, that people actually got the kind of pay that they should be getting in the arts world,
Well,
and that maybe has had a
Edinburgh,
consequence as
yeah.
well.
Well, Edinburgh has high standards in general, and so did the film
Mm,
festival, so did the Filmhouse. And it's very civilized, and it's very nice, and it's very friendly. It's sort of like
mm.
the sort of Betty's tea rooms of film festivals.
The
You know,
film.
it was a class above, and it was open to everybody. And it wasn't snobbish, and it was intelligent. It was just absolutely brilliant, and it's a real tragedy. It's ended up in this situation.
Now, that situation is where it is right now. It's a dramatic situation, but reading, and I don't think reading between the lines would be quite the right way to say it, but there obviously is a design, not least from the Scottish government, to do something about this if it can. And also, I think from the brief comments again from Mark Cousins is indicating that he believes that the Edinburgh International Film Festival will survive in some form, and hopefully also the Edinburgh Film House. The question is,
Mm.
by making this ruthless decision at this point, sand in the what's the word I'm looking for? Line in the sand, not sand in the line,
Mm. Drawing a line
and
in the
not
sand,
a
yeah.
question of starting all over again, but actually breathing space to think, what the bloody hell do we do now in this situation? I think it was referred to as being a perfect storm
Yeah.
scenario. You've mentioned
Well,
COVID. You've mentioned the festival's changing when it was on. Also, an overall factor that's commonplace is that cinema going has not returned to the levels that it used to, and
no,
that was
that's
actually
true.
apparent as well at the films that we went to at the film festival. I think it would be
Well,
fair to say screenings were not as busy.
well, if you think about it, you know, it's well known that Edinburgh has always supported world cinema in general,
Yes, yes.
international cinema, and people used to travel from abroad,
Mm.
critics and people from the film world, to see
Yep,
films at Edinburgh. But nowadays you can stream them all anyway. So, you know,
you can.
we once met a film critic from New Zealand. Well, would a film critic from New Zealand actually travel to Edinburgh anymore when they can actually stream the films? And they probably can't. So the world's also moved on a bit in a way that hasn't
Yeah.
really helped the
And I
Edinburgh
remember we met an
International
expert on
Film Festival or
Japanese
the
film
film house.
who traveled the world watching
Mm.
Japanese films wherever he could. So, and again, there was a strong stand
Yeah,
of
yeah.
Japanese
So
films
again,
at Edinburgh, and that's the kind of thing that it did. It lived up to that name, Edinburgh International Film Festival, not parochial film festival, a truly international film festival.
but it really does need someone like Matt Cousins back involved because
Yeah.
he was the artistic director of the film festival
Mm,
for a couple of years in the 90s, and
mm.
he was the one who got people like David Cronenberg
He
and
was.
Bernardo
He was.
Bertolucci to turn up in
Mm,
person just through his sheer charisma, hard work, his knowledge and intelligence towards cinema and the history of cinema. And it really needs someone with equal charisma to run the film festival and to run the film
mm,
house because
mm.
in a tougher world, it's not enough just to be, you know,
No,
competent
it's not.
and do the job properly. You need to have
Mm,
passion and vision. And they haven't had a direct to the festival for a while that's had that sort of passion, I don't think.
mm. No, I mean, it wasn't that Mark was unique, but there was something that it was the Pied Piper element with him. He did have that sense of you would follow wherever he went with what he was suggesting to see. Also, his own love of Edinburgh was, bled out of him. He absolutely loved Edinburgh. It was what made him a filmmaker, as he said. That going to the film house, going to the festival himself, and studying film. But it was Edinburgh that has so shaped him as a person, as much as being an Irishman, as well as obviously shaped him. And that's interesting too. That's, I think, ideally what you want your a film festival to do. It should encourage young people to go to film and then to want to become filmmakers as well. That should always be one of the aims, not just of the Edinburgh Film Festival, but certainly I think it's fair to say that was one of the senses that you had about the festival, that it was inspirational that way.
I think it can survive. I think the
Right.
money side
That's
of
what I was
it
going to ask
is a
you.
real
That's what I
problem.
was going to
But
ask you.
I think it can survive. But at one point, until the late 70s, I think it was run from a basement in one of Edinburgh's nice streets. So
Yes.
it, I think it is possible with the right people
Mm.
to do probably a more economically run film festival that's good. But it
Yeah.
requires
Yeah.
or Linda Miles or Jim Hickey. It needs that caliber of person to get
Yes.
involved
Yeah.
if they're going to
Yeah.
recalibrate it in a
Mm.
successful fashion.
I mean, could you envisage there being no film festival next summer while it's recalibrated, it's worked?
Obviously, yeah, but
Mm.
I think you're right. They've taken the decision quite early to give
They
them
have.
time. But
They
who
definitely have.
knows?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's in the wind. But it
Mm.
is terrible news.
It's absolutely. I think it's devastating implications for the arts world as much as anything. Edinburgh is one of the great arts cities. Obviously, we all know of the international festival, let alone the Fringe Festival, which goes global as well. And so, when actually one of the key tranches of Edinburgh films, this happens, it's clearly concerning that is this a start of maybe further announcements for further film festivals. One has to hope not. One has to hope that this is something that the circumstances, in particular in Edinburgh, have led to this. But we obviously look with interest as to what happens to events, London Film Festival, Leeds Film Festival, Sheffield Documentary Film Festival, where what quite happens with these events now.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to get negative now because this is always plenty of time to get negative down the road. So at
There
this
is.
point, I'm going to
I
hope for the
agree, and
best.
that's a fair point. And actually, I think it's important to say that both of us, our instinct is that this will survive, and that a remedy will be found. Now,
Well,
Graham,
John Huston, the famous John Huston, the
yes,
brilliant right to the 40s to the
mm,
80s, he once
mm.
described Edinburgh International Film Festival as the only film festival in the world worth a damn,
Yeah,
and that tells you how good it was.
yeah, absolutely. Graham, you, unlike me, I've not heard Suede's new album. Suede's new album, Brett Anderson has called Suede's punk album. I leave that as a kind of starting point on it. Suede are playing both York Barbican, and they've just added, I think, am I right in thinking they've added a Leeds date now?
Yeah, yeah. In 2023, next year, I think they're playing O2 Academy.
And they've also,
Is that where they're
interestingly,
playing?
Graham, I think it is because the York gig is sold out already. But interestingly, they did a tie-in with Crash Records where they played at Leeds Brunel Social Club in September, and you bought a ticket and you got the ticket and the album as a deal. And they've
Mm,
done this
mm.
with a few things. This was the latest example of them doing that. So I don't think, did you go to that event, or you just gone out and bought the album anyway?
No, I couldn't make it. I was busy, but I'm going to try and go to the Leeds one next year in the proper
Yeah.
film tour. But yeah, it's
Yes, well,
called
I'm
Autofiction.
hoping to go to because it's a
And
long time since. I mean, I saw Suede right back at the start when the first hits were happening, and they were the biggest buzz in the country at that time. Huge expectations, and that gosh, I mean that's a long time ago now, of course, isn't it? So that was the time that I saw them way back. So, but what about this album then, Graham? Do you see it as a punk album, or is he being a little bit exaggerating on that?
it's not a punk album.
No.
It's only punky in the sense that it's got huge amounts of energy. It doesn't
Mm,
mess around. A lot of it's very fast, and they tried to record, which usually means that the backing tracks play blended. But it's not a punk album. But the first three
no.
tracks are like, my God, she still leads me on. Personality disorder and back in 15 again. They punch you right in the face. It's like bam, 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 no messing around, straight out the
Mm,
blocks, straight on with it. So it isn't punk, but it sounds like an album that they were desperate to make from a band. You're desperate to get this out in the world. There's a real sense of urgency about the whole thing, which
mm,
isn't quite punk, but it's got something in
no.
common with punk. And it's had rave reviews, and it
It
went on
has. It
charts at
has.
number 2, which was their highest chart entry since I think coming up back in the
Yeah.
1990s. and it isn't as good as Coming Up or Dogman Star
No.
or the Debbie album,
No.
but it is probably their best album since they reformed 4 albums ago because
Yes.
it's got complete self belief, and while the songs aren't quite as strong as their glory days of the '90s, they're all solidly good, and it's got the album has got longevity in it. It doesn't start off with a bang then dribble off. By the time you get to like track 7, Black Ice, then track 8, Shadow Self, it's still holding your interest. It's still got the energy. It's still got ideas. So it's, for a band that's been going for such a long time, it's a great album.
And what about Brett's singing?
Well, that's the usual Brett singing. I mean, he doesn't change his vocal style much, and
I'm
he's
just
always
thinking
commanding.
because
He's not a weak singer, is he? He's not easily ignored.
no, he was very mannered in the early days. There was that affectation that was rooted in David Bowie, and I wonder whether it took him a little longer to find his own voice. And maybe I'm being unfair in saying that, but I did used to think there was an element of rip off about that.
No, so I never thought so. Like, isn't as mannered now because he's got
Mm.
dignity and he wants to be convincing. So the days of him being indulgent, extravagant have sort of gone,
Yeah.
and I sort of miss those
Yes.
days. It's the one thing they could do with trying to do is
Swagger.
actually they've been so focused since the reform, very
Yes.
focused. It's almost like they need to loosen up at some point and let the focus develop into like a richer, wider frame
Yeah.
of ideas. They're quite narrow in their frame of style of music and their riffs now. That's the only downside to the album, and that's part of the reason why it's not as good as their first 3 albums. In that it's so narrow in its musical approach, they could do with actually at some point take the foot off the pedal and relaxing. But whether they will, I
Paris
don't
had
know.
thought, Graham, that they would bring back Bernard Butler.
That'll never happen. That'd be an absolute miracle. But there's some great bass playing by
Mm.
what's his face again? I've forgotten his little name. There's
But
some
is he the
great bass
brother? Is
playing
he the brother of?
by
Is it
Matt
Osmond's
Osman.
brother?
Yeah, it's Matt
It's
Osman. Yeah,
Osmond's brother, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
Not the Osmond
The,
brothers.
yeah, the bass is fantastic on the whole album. It's
Yeah.
almost worth buying an album just for the bass lines. So yeah,
Mm.
it's a good album.
What about the artwork side of it? Because I think Suede have always been an outstanding band for artwork. I've always loved their artwork.
Well, a sign of self confidence is a little booklet you get with the CD version, which I got. It's
Mm.
just black and white photographs, so edgy black and white photographs of derelict urban type landscapes. And the front
Mm.
cover is black and white, and it's a naked man clasping his
Yeah.
hands around his own shoulders on top of a
Mm.
mattress, and it's a very powerful image. So Suede know what they're doing. They've got a purpose. They just need to, like, at some point, I think, for their own artistic good, relax a little.
Yeah.
But I know it comes back and just delivers weak versions of their past. They were determined to, like, have good quality control, and they
Mm.
largely have done.
And actually, in terms of then transferring that across to a gig, I think those things that you want there in the presentation of an album will come through. That swagger comes through in the live performances with Suede. So I think maybe that gap that you're feeling there about maybe expanding, I think come the live focus when obviously Anderson is such a supreme frontman.
Mm.
That's where you'll probably
Yeah,
see Suede at their
I
best
think
to
this
sing.
show's going to be great for sure. You're
Mm,
right, Charles.
mm,
And
mm.
the opening single from the album, "She Still Leads Me On," is a classic Suede track because I cannot get it out of my
A
head.
lot of BBC
And,
Six music radio play for that. The constant radio play for that song.
yeah,
Yeah.
but that doesn't guarantee you remember it. You only remember songs that
No,
are good.
it doesn't. But I think the fact that it's been chosen for that, I think sometimes stations want to be a little dismissive of bands that have been around a long time, but they've actually been very strong on supporting this album so far.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's quite cheering to see a bunch of old or middle-aged musicians still turning out good quality goods. It's quite heartening.
Exactly, exactly. Now, Graham, we've touched on Amsterdam and Paris, and Leeds and Harrogate. I think when M had pop music, I don't think it put Harrogate in that list. Talk about pop music, but your experiences in Amsterdam and Paris. You ask the interesting question: this, how British are they? And we'll come on to the
Hmm.
second part, which I really am curious about. But how? I mean, I never think of Paris as remotely British,
Yeah.
and I think they take great glee in it being anything but British. Amsterdam, well, maybe I think they're a bit more relaxed than we are. I think so. I'm not even sure that, but I think they like us more than the French. But did it feel remotely British to you? Either place? Has it even changed
Well, yeah,
actually
but
since you
the
last
interesting
went?
thing about, in terms of like indie rock culture and
Yes.
musical history, Amsterdam was very much like Copenhagen and Oslo
Yeah.
and even Reykjavik in Iceland, in
Mm.
that they seem to be really into like British bands, the sort of bands you hear on BBC Six Music. And
Yep.
quite a lot of the British bands had just played Amsterdam or were just about to play Amsterdam.
Mm.
And so I thought, oh, this is interesting. Amsterdam actually is interested in, the sort of bands that BBC Music plays from
Yeah.
Britain. In Paris, you went to Paris and it wasn't quite as much as that, but the way in which Paris was more like Britain was that Amsterdam was so well run. It was so
Yes.
civilized. Public transport system was brilliant. The segregated cycle lanes are brilliant. The people were so nice and not edgy and not angry, and there was no honking of horns by cars getting angry. They were just lovely, lovely people. And then I went to
On the
Paris,
other
and
hand, Paris.
yeah, but bizarrely, I felt more at home in Paris than I felt in
Did you? Because
Amsterdam.
the the,
Yeah,
the,
because
the,
the
the
French are
shrug
like
of
us.
shoulders in Paris, that
Yeah, no,
Parisian uh,
the French are more aggressive.
coolness.
No, the
Mm,
French are more aggressive. They're more edgy. They're more
exactly.
prickly. They're more relaxed than the British, but compared to the Dutch, they're not relaxed at all.
No.
Well, compared to Amsterdam, that is, because I do not know Holland as a whole. And I thought, wait a
Mm.
minute, if I feel more at home in Paris, that's because Paris is more like Britain than Amsterdam.
Which I would have. Interesting answer. I would not have expected that at all, Graham. We've got a less than a minute to go. If you can describe in less than a minute why you got caught up in a left-wing demo against Macron.
Well, we couldn't get to Shakespeare Co. Book Company because bookshop, which we love, because
Mm.
there was loads and loads of fresh policemen closing off roads dressed like Mad Max, completely tooled up
Oh,
like for a war.
God.
And then this huge
Yeah.
demonstration came around the road, and it was like a hard left trade union complaining about Macron and the cost of living. And this went on for
Mm.
literally an hour of more and more trade unions protesters. So eventually I had to try and get across the road, otherwise we're just trapped there. And of course that meant sort of like joining the demonstration for a bit. And I got out of there quite quickly because I thought I don't want the French police thinking I'm doing.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic Sub production.